Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome back to the program Andy Clark, who's the CFO at C.H. Robinson. And today we're going to talk about digital evolution in the supply chain, how to prepare for today and tomorrow. Now, it's safe to say that the pace of change in supply chain management, especially from a technology standpoint, continues to accelerate. And it just seems that one of the big things that people keep talking about these days is the digital evolution or the digital transformation of supply chain management. But what does that mean, exactly? Why is it important? And what are some of the key capabilities companies need to not only keep pace with this change, but find new avenues of growth and differentiation in the future? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to address today. And it's great to have Andy back in the program to kind of share his insights and perspective on this topic. So, Andy, welcome back.
Thank you, Adrian. It's great to be back. Great to see you again.
So, Andy, you were back in this program. It was probably a little over a year ago, and we were talking about, at that time, we were talking about things like Uber and all that. It was actually one of our more, popular episodes. And then obviously you and I got together earlier this year, back in September. You were part of the logistics leaders for Type 1 Diabetes Cure team. So we had a fun time there. So it's good to kind of get back in the conversation here.
Yeah, it's great. And unfortunately, winter has arrived. So 100-mile rides outside will not be in my future, at least until 2018.
That's right. Well, same for me. I'm in the basement already. So training in the basement. So let's go into the topic now. I mean, Andrew, like I said, there's a lot of discussion today, as well as a lot of hype and confusion, really, about the digital supply chain. I mean, from your perspective in the industry, I mean, where are we today, and why is this topic getting so much attention?
Yeah. You mentioned there's hype, there's confusion, but there's also reality, and the reality is it's taking hold. And I would just we categorize it as we're still in the early innings of this digital revolution. And you can think about it from the shipper perspective and all the way through to the carrier perspective, and how fragmented both of those participants are, particularly on the shipper side. There's hundreds of thousands, millions of shippers that are out there, and their ability to access information on their own supply chain is becoming increasingly important, which they don't have, and they don't have the resources to commit to building it on their own. So now you have things, cloud-based services, software as a service, platform as a service, that are cropping up every day and making it more of a reality. And I think that technology that you and I embrace as consumers will eventually bleed into the B2B world. But I don't think we're as far along as maybe the news stories might suggest. You and I can go and do ride sharing. We can do apartment or hotel sharing in terms of the Airbnb, but it's just not quite perfected into the business to business environment. It will get there. It will get there. There are companies like ours that are committing hundreds of millions of dollars to the space to make it a reality, but we're just not as far along as I think a lot of people would otherwise believe. If you picked up a trade rag, or if you listen to a news story, there's people now popping up on CNBC, and it's getting a lot more press because you think about the overall logistics spend as a percent of GDP at 7.5%. So it's a big part of our industry, and it's a big part of the overall economy. So it is a reality. But that confusion and what happens around all that is it remains to be seen.
So what do you think is holding companies back? I mean, is particularly in our industry, right, from a logistics supply chain standpoint, is it just kind of the conservative nature of kind of the industry? Is it kind of particularly for companies that are publicly traded, this kind of short-term mentality in terms of risk avoidance, trying to make this quarter's numbers or this year's numbers, where a lot of these things perhaps a little bit more of a long-term play? I mean, what's holding people back or companies back?
I don't know if it's as much as that short-term thinking, particularly on the publicly traded side. I mean, we've spent a lot of time with our investors talking about the investments that we made, and we make large investments annually in our technology budget. I think what it is, that I would go through a couple of threads and a couple of themes. And the first is people in transportation have long memories. And those memories are of Y2K, and they are of everything was going to go on the internet and the interwebs of 1999 and 2000, and then it didn't. And a lot of people have spent a lot of money in transportation technology that really hasn't amounted to a lot. So there's that aspect of it. So people do have long memories. The other aspect of it is the convergence of a standard or of a platform. And with respect to on the ride sharing market, I mean, that got to a point rather quickly in terms of the adoption of a platform, whether it be Uber or Lyft, or in certain marketplaces it's different, particularly international. But the convergence to a single, or very few platforms into transportation. Again, I go back to the tens of hundreds of thousands, millions of shippers, the millions of trucks that are out there, and the millions of ways in which you can move freight. We think, and we've done a lot of research and analysis in this area, is that the complexities of individual supply chains are so great that it's going to take a long time for a single or a handful of platforms to emerge as the sole leader. And when you think about it, it's some of these large software providers that are really kind of waking up to the space versus, that's on the one end of the spectrum, the Oracle, the SAP, the JDA, I mean, like really large, well-capitalized organizations. And then the startups that you and I read about, it seems like weekly that are getting, 10, 20, $50 million on the other side of the spectrum. It's this huge barbell, and I don't think anybody has a clear viewpoint as to the convergence of a standard or a multiple of standards as to how it's going to impact those millions of supply chains that are in effect right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because I think that ultimately, you see that throughout history, right? It's the when there's no clear standard, identified, that creates some friction in the adoption, right? Because the last thing you want to do is, jump on one bandwagon and then a year or two or three from now, it gets displaced completely by some new technology or something else.
It does, and all of us in the transportation space have technology that currently works today. It's not, and we think that there are, some that are better than others, including ours. And I think the issue is that nobody's rushing out. There's no burning platform on the technology side in anybody's company, because there are trucking companies today that are running off of AS400 systems that work perfectly well. And
right. It's the
thing, and it works. What's the impetus to change?
Right. Well, let's kind of dive into perhaps some of these technologies that are kind of grabbing the headlines, right? So you've got machine learning, autonomous vehicles, and blockchain. Well, probably three of the most talked about technologies this year. I mean, is the hype around these technologies, warranted, and how and when will they, have an impact on supply chains? I mean, I think we probably already answered some of that question, but what's your thought on these things?
Again, I'll go back to as we started this conversation. I think there is there's a reality that it is going to take hold in our industry, and we often talk about people probably in terms of, okay, it's in the news, so you might overemphasize or overprice the impact that it has today, and underemphasize the price it'll have or the impact it'll have 5 years from now. Because in this environment and in our business, timing does matter. You can certainly be way too early to it, and be the first person storming the beach. And quite frankly, you can be too late to it. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of analysis around that. But diving right into each of those categories, I'll start with machine learning. From our perspective in our space, it's still very nascent. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal this morning, and as you would imagine, that industry, particularly financial services, has been committing a lot of capital in that. And there was a quote that they're just spending a lot, and it doesn't prove out over time. There's a few funds that might make it in a year or a quarter, but the returns that they generate by putting machines scouring data as I described, a very discrete, there's only a certain number of publicly traded companies or publicly traded bonds that are out there, and analyzing the data around that, they still haven't proven out the returns for the investments that they're making. We have a group of data scientists in our organization that do a wonderful job of programming and helping our operators and our leaders make better decisions. But they're not making the decisions for them. They're helping. It's machine and human aided, which we believe are going to be the successful strategy in that area. You know, autonomous vehicles are yet another interesting example. You know, we had a group of us and we were out in Silicon Valley, and we were listening to a presentation, and this gentleman in the room who was very well financially back said, "Hey, I'm one of 12 software engineers in this space that are worth $1 billion." And of course, all of us said, "Well, that's an interesting thought. Are you hiring?" But what makes it so? And he said, "Well, we're mapping the surface transportation in the United States so that there will be a 2 centimeter of tolerance at 80 miles an hour." So you just think about like that as a concept versus open up Waze or open up Google Maps, and you know, if you've got good cell phone coverage, it'll tell you what road you're on. And if it's not, you'll get that error that bounces around that we've all struggled with. And so the gap between that Google Maps and mapping to 2 centimeters of tolerance at 80 miles an hour, that's a huge delta to get to that. And that's what level 5 autonomous requires. Will we get there? Absolutely. Will it take a long time? Yeah. Will people spend billions of dollars to get to it? Yeah. It's just not there yet in our space. And so again, it's how do you phase in your investments, and how do you phase in the impact that it has on your supply chain? Absolutely matters, because you can spend a lot of money and not get to the result that you want. And then, you know, finally, you know, distributed ledgers, blockchain. There's a lot of talk around that. And there's a lot of articles. And please, if you ask me to describe or explain blockchain, I'm going to turn off this computer right now. But we're doing a lot of research in that area. But again, it goes back to the convergence of what that standard is and what are people going to agree to. And today there is a mechanism for that trust that's built between organizations, and put it into a program, put it into a distributed ledger. It completely makes sense, but the sequencing and the timing of getting to that is where all the work will be done, and it's not there yet. And it will get there. It will get there. I mean, we as humans have proven for ever since our you know, advent on this earth, is that we will continue to evolve. And we will use those tools, like to make fire, to hunt. You know, like we will evolve, and we'll learn as we evolve, and that learning will lead to yet new and greater and better things. It's just not here today.
Yeah, no, I think you bring some great points. I mean, you know, I think to kind of paraphrase or summarize a little bit what you said, I mean, it really sounds like, you know, kind of part of the challenge is really, you know, pacing yourself appropriately, and it's all in the timing, right? Because if you move too quickly, you know, you could be bleeding edge, but you know, that may result in you know, a dead end, or in not, you know, getting too much results. But if you wait too long, if you're just completely skeptical, if you completely embrace the status quo, or, you know, if it ain't broke, why fix it mentality, you can quickly find yourself too far behind, and then, you know, not be able to catch up. So it's kind of finding that middle, you know, that middle pace, if you will, in terms of keeping a pulse of what's happening, and taking the appropriate steps in the right pace, you know, to keep up with the changes, so that if and when it does happen, you're ready, you're in that front pack, if you will.
And you know, you'd also asked, and those are all valid points, but the impact that it has on the supply chain is, there's always a prior and subsequent, right? There's always, if you think about the value of your phone or the value of your car, the majority of the value of that asset that you own, that they make, comes from the suppliers. And so there's your supply chain, there's your supplier supply chain, and then there's the subsequent on you know, where it goes from that. And you and I, when we catch a ride to an airport, there's no consideration of what we were doing prior, what we're doing after. That the people that have perfected that marketplace really just understand that one aspect of you getting into a car and getting dropped off somewhere. versus the supply chain is, as you know, the complexity of it is immense. And having a viewpoint of what happens prior to you seeing that and what happens after you see that, it matters, which is, we spend a lot and we invest a lot in that supply chain visibility to help our customers get greater access to make more informed decisions on what their supply chain moves are going to be. And I go back to, the conversations that I think you and I have had, different points of, it also requires a pretty big financial commitment to go into and change out, whether it's your software, whether it is your actual hard assets. I mean, somebody smarter than me is going to figure out the value, and it's trillions of dollars of all the rolling stock that's out there right now. And let's just assume for a moment that all the technology and all those assets are ready to go online right now. They're not. We're years away from that. But assuming for a moment that that it were available right now, is anybody going to bleed out their assets? You have trucks on the road that are worth something right now, and I don't see people accelerating their replenishment of their rolling stock based on the fact that new technology is available. And if that new technology doesn't provide a better service at a lower price, or that asset doesn't provide a better service at a lower price, it's not, doesn't allow you to have a much higher utilization on it. I just don't see, consumers like us or businesses like ours or anybody else that's out there in the space jumping in with both feet to say, here we're going to write a really large check to replenish our asset base because there's some new technology or what have you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, certainly there's a lot of, investment that's already taken place. Heck, there's still a lot of companies that are still, in year 3 of their 5-year ERP rollout, modernization rollout. So, yeah. Either they're willing to kind of, pull the plug and write that off and then kind of jump onto the next thing, or they're going to, ride out, the current investments as much as they can. I mean, another topic that's been getting a lot of attention these days is the electronic logging, devices. It certainly grabbed the headlines this year, especially as the mandate starts getting enforced here later this month. There's a lot of questions and predictions around what impact ELDs are going to have on, on trucking capacity and productivity. I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, a lot of stuff to unpack on that question, both in terms of the compliance and so it's in 6 days, December 18th, and they're going to do a soft enforcement until the beginning of April, and then change it. I think they're going to learn a lot in the next 4 months, and the things that they learn are going to, at least you would assume, shape and direct the decisions and changes that I'll make in 2018. So everybody knows that the hours of service are not changing. There's still the hours of service law is not changing. The manner in which you comply is. So you're going from the paper log to the to the electronic logging, and the cost over that 3-year time period that when they first announced it have gone down dramatically. So mobile app with connectivity, the engine block gives you ELD compliant, and so. We've done a soft survey, and the vast majority of our providers right now are compliant. We expect, by the way, as they do today, to comply to every state, local, and federal law. We expect them on December 18th to comply with every state, local, federal law, and we don't see that changing. We do see and you can look at anybody else's number, 3 to 5% on the capacity reduction. And you can see to a degree that the capacity that remains to be less productive. The good news is we proved, most recently and throughout our history, but most recently with the hurricanes in Florida and Texas, our ability to help our customers get capacity when they need it. And our team did a wonderful job during that very difficult time to help our customers get their loads moved. That will actually happen it'll happen on December 17th. It's going to happen on December 18th and 19th and every day thereafter. So we've built a system, we've built a team that's capable of doing that. What I do believe in is supply and demand, right? So if demand as stagnant as continues to increase as what we've seen this year, and supply comes out, we've all done the supply and demand curve, prices go up. And our prices and our costs have gone up throughout the year. And we've talked about that on our earnings calls, we've talked about that with our investors. So pricing has and will go up, and that'll reflect. And so when you have that, when pricing comes back in, you'll see supply come back into the marketplace, and you're seeing that right now, by the way, with Class 8 truck orders. They're not online, but the orders are going up. So our view on it is that you'll see changes, but just like everything else, those changes will have a second and third and fourth degree impact, and we'll help our customers manage through that with their supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that aligns with what I've been hearing from others as well. I mean, I think we'll certainly learn a lot over the next few weeks and months here in terms of what the real impact is going to be, and then you've got that coupled with economic growth, what we're seeing there on the demand side, and then just the overall or ongoing challenges of driver shortages and what's happening on fuel and things of that nature. So I think it's what makes transportation so interesting and complex, and it gets transportation executives sometimes pulling out their hair trying to figure out or try to predict what's going to happen in the market.
Adrian, I still have a lot of hair, so I'm not pulling that out yet.
You do. So you're one of the lucky guys, but folks like me, we've already pulled them out a long time ago.
But I mean, if you think about it, it is what we talk internally, we talk externally about our ability to help our customers execute over a long period of time, and we show, as part of our investor presentation, a price and cost chart. So the price of the customers and the cost of the carriers. And it's a very fascinating and interesting line. And if you go over that last decade, it's up 2.5%, both price and cost. Now there's always a dislocation, and sometimes prices are ahead of costs, and other times costs are ahead of prices. And it's usually a 3 to 5 quarter lag, depending upon the severity of the change. And if you're a supply chain manager, if you're on our side, it's how do you want to manage through that? Do you want to lock that in? You want to go back a decade prior and say, hey, if we offer you both on the customer side as well on the carrier side 2.5% increases, I can guarantee it, everybody would have said, absolutely not. There's no way. We want to do this, and yet here we are a decade later, and it's 2.5%. I think companies like ours, and particularly us, help our customers manage through that, not only the price and the cost, but the disruption in the movement of freight during that time period.
Yep. Well, you just brought up a word that was going to be my next question, which is disruption, right? And you hear that all the time today. Disrupt or be disrupted. That seems to be kind of a new kind of business mantra these days. Do you subscribe to that? Belief? Disrupt or be disrupted. And if everybody is out there trying to disrupt, the industry, does that lead to progress or just to chaos?
Great question, and I'll give you the yes, but I do agree with it, but you need to moderate. You need to think about it. You need to actually time it. You need to be thoughtful in that, because disruption for disruption's sake doesn't really benefit anybody. That's where you get to exactly what you're talking about, chaos, which is, hey, how do we provide a better product sooner at a lower price? Like, to me and our organization, that's how we think about disruption. It's not just regular way brokerage, you call, we haul. It's how do we provide a better service, a better solution to our customers sooner at a lower price? There's a huge element of that that's people. So what do? We go out and we hire and develop and train really talented people. That matters. They then, and by the way, those people, there's 15,000 of us across the globe to help our customers, our roughly 100,000 customers, and our roughly 80,000 providers, be effective in managing, whether you're on the shipper side or whether you're on the carrier side, manage their supply chain. It matters to have really smart people. The process, you have to run a good process. You have to know what to do when supply chain disruptions inevitably occur. And they always occur. They occur when there isn't weather. They occur when there isn't hours of service or regulatory change. That happens all the time. And then finally, technology. And what I think that people tend to perhaps overemphasize is the concept of disruption as it relates purely to technology. And I think sometimes when the conversation is tilted too heavily towards disruption on the technology side, that's where you can spin yourself into a little bit of a circle and not really kind of come out with a better solution. Oh, the technology needs to do this and needs to do that. And those are all things that every company, including ours, deals with. But what we try to do is moderate all three of them, the people, the process, and the technology, so that disruption happens on all three levels and in all three areas, so that we can help our customers more effectively manage their supply chain sooner at a lower price.
No, that's a great point, especially the point about people, because I mean, I think this is still ultimately a people business. And, you know, even though we talk about things like artificial intelligence, you know, we're not quite there yet with the, you know, the intelligence that humans have in terms of the experience and even just the relationship building and communication that's required to really, you know, person to person communication that's required to succeed in this industry. Yeah, kind of building on kind of the last point you just made there on the technology side. I mean, one of the kind of the mistakes that I see that a lot of companies do is, you know, they kind of chase the new shiny things, right? So they see, you know, us talking about machine learning and, you know, blockchain and all this kind of sexy new technology, and they may kind of go chase, you know, after it without really first identifying the business opportunity or the problem that they're trying to, you know, solve there. You know, so in order to kind of build that foundation to, you know, to ultimately succeed and drive business value around some of these things, I mean, what's required? I mean, what goes into that foundation, and how do you get it?
Yeah, it is a good segue in terms of that shiny new thing, and you know, from our organization, which has been around for 113 years, having partnered with the Fortune, you know, companies that we've partnered with and helping them manage their supply chain, we kind of view it as the wisdom of the crowds, and the crowds being not what we always necessarily hear on the outside, although we do listen to everything that's being said on the outside, but the wisdom of the crowds of our customers and the wisdom of the crowd of our people. And it's kind of that whole process of building ideas based on what we hear from our customers. And they're pretty good about telling us, whether directly or indirectly, the things that they want us to do. And then the wisdom of the crowd of our own people, the 15,000 smart people that we have across the globe that are saying, hey, by the way, they're more closely connected to our customers than anybody else out there. We have thousands of account managers and operations people throughout all different parts of our business that are listening every day to what the suppliers want, what the shippers want, what the consignee wants, and building a plan based on that, not based on, hey, so-and-so issued a press release and they're doing whatever it is they're doing, and therefore, you know, I never want to give the impression that Robinson's like student body left. Let's just go do this right now because somebody issued a press release, and then the next week, student body right, you know, based on somebody else's press release. Is really a thoughtful process that builds up these ideas that are returns justified and returns analyzed to say, wow, okay, we believe that the market, based on what our customers and based on what our carriers and our partners are telling us, are going in this direction. We have a very intellectual and intelligent viewpoint that this is where it's going to be. And then we begin to build a plan based on that, that takes into consideration time, it takes into consideration cost, takes into consideration all these things, because it matters to us to get it right. Because it just seems in these environments, and again, I don't want to ever come across as, we don't ever want to come across as a Luddite and say we're not paying attention, because we do. I mean, we have teams that are doing nothing other than listening as part of their job, not their full job, but listening to what is being done and set out there. But it's also, there's a capital game, and you know, coming from the background that a lot of us have here on the financial side, that says, hey, during periods of relatively stable supply and demand, and during periods of inexpensive capital, we've always had competition come into our marketplace. And then when that cost of capital goes up or disruption occurs in a sustained manner, we've just seen our ability to prove our worth to our customers and to our providers in a much greater capacity than anybody else out there. And so during those cyclical ups and downs, you know, sometimes we look really smart when the time's right, and sometimes we don't look as smart when it goes against us. But going back over that 10-year period that I've talked about, we've grown our company tremendously during that time period, And I don't say that as a compliment on us. I say it on our people's ability to solve their customers' problems. And the only way that we know that they value what we do is they give us more business. And what we've seen is they've consistently and continuously given us more business over time.
Yeah, I think your point about kind of listening to customers and kind of particularly those that are on the front lines of what's happening day to day, right? It's easy for perhaps for those that are further up, to kind of get a sense of what's happening in the market, but the real closest signal are those that are obviously talking to customers on a day in and day out basis, those that are trying to kind of move product, those that are trying to provide that visibility, and kind of getting that direct feedback from the carrier community, the shipper community, the consignees, and being able to, feed that back into the organization in terms of helping to, define the right path forward, and how that fits into, all these trends that we talked about. I think, certainly that's part of the winning formula there. Andy, as a way to wrap up, I mean, if I'm, a supply chain logistics executive and I'm meeting with the CFO of my company, so you're obviously the CFO there, but if I'm meeting with kind of a counterpart, CFO at my company, I mean, what's the most important thing I can tell him or her about, what's happening in supply chain, management today, and what to expect in the weeks and months ahead?
Well, I would offer a couple of points. The first is that if you're a CFO of any company of note or of size today, and you're relying on a transportation manager to come and tell you what's going to happen, you're in trouble, because the supply chain management is a board level discussion. I mean, let's just go to retail on the one end of the spectrum. I mean, it's right there in the heart of every retail company. If you look at what's happening to some of these well-established companies that are going bankrupt. And so it's all about supply chain. It's all about accessing the customer and providing that customer the type of product and the fashion and the manner in which they want it today. So supply chain disruption is a board level discussion. I would say that what matters, and we have had several conversations of, you think about the way the cycle is getting shaping up as we end 17 and we go into 18. It's important, if you're a supply chain manager, you're a CFO, to have good relationships with all of your suppliers and all the people that help affect that supply chain. Because you think about demand being stronger, you think about capacity being constrained, you think about the company's ability to invest in technology. Partnership really does matter. We talk about it, and we can show you over a long period of time how and why and where it matters. And at certain points in that cyclical environment, it matters more and it matters less. I would just tell you that 2018 is going to matter a lot more, because it will be a constrained, it will be a challenging environment. And if you're a transportation manager that hasn't developed those relationships, or if you're a CFO that hasn't developed those relationships, that don't really understand the impacts of one aspect versus the other in your supply chain, you might be in for somewhat of a difficult 2018. Conversely, if you've done that and you've really worked with your partners, whether they be the asset-based providers, whether they be the third-party logistics providers, or anybody in between, if you work to develop those relationships, I would offer that 2018 could be a tremendous year of opportunity for you, as you are able to provide for your end consumer a better product sooner at a lower price. And that matters in this environment.
Certainly, walking the talk and collaboration and more effective and honest and clear communication between all the parties. I wholeheartedly agree that that's going to be, critical for success. Going back to your earlier point about, if you're relying on a transportation professional or, someone to educate you as a CFO or tell you what's going on, you might be in trouble. I think you're right. It needs to be a board level and a C-level discussion. But I think just to kind of counterpoint that a little bit, I think the unfortunate reality, that the research has shown is that, very few companies have a seat at the table, for supply chain in their, C-suite. And so I think that's something else that, companies need to work at, is really, bringing supply chain to give them a spot at the executive table there to have those discussions and be able to learn from, the executives that are on the front lines, and then, vice versa, have the supply chain executives also learn the language of the CFO and understand the business impacts and the business considerations in what they do as well.
And to build on that, it goes back to the type of supply chain that you on that side might want to have. Do you want to have an established supply chain? Do you want to have that partner help you manage the peaks and the valleys, or do you just want to participate in whatever comes your way on that? And I give the example, and we talk about those digital providers. Where I was in Chicago and it cost me $15 to get to Wrigley Field and it cost me $150 to get back. And the only difference was 3 hours. And I would just think that if you're a supply chain manager and that's the bet that you are making, that you would have a very challenging conversation going into your CFO. A guy like me is like, you did what? The discrepancy of the difference of paying those two rates in a 3-hour period is untenable, because you can't price it into the cost that you're going to turn around and offer to your customer. You have to have a more established and a better supply chain relationship with greater visibility of prior and subsequent, so that you can effectively manage it.
Great. Final point there. And with that, we're out of time, Andy, but like I always say at the, end of our conversations, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics. And there were so many, different topics here and meaty, subjects here that, I think we could probably spend all day, talking about it, or have a whole conference just on this whole episode topic. But I think you provide some great insights and advice. And I think, basically buckle up and then let's see what all the excitement that 2018 is going to bring us in the weeks ahead here.
Sounds good, Adrian. Happy holidays and Happy New Year to your family.
Great, and to you as well. And I want to thank those of you that joined us today. If you are watching this episode on demand at the C.H. Robinson website or on the Talking Logistics website, and you've got a question or a comment for Andy, you can post it there, and I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.